timing?
We were waiting for a while.
Is he all set?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, I will. Good evening. This is the full board budget meeting number 3. Today is February the 15th, 2023. Tonight we will be talking about special programs or student services. And are we talking about curriculum as well? Very good. We have a full evening. With that, then I will just ask Ms. Hastings if she will take the roll.
Sure. Ms. Meeker?
Here.
Mr. Crowe?
Here.
Ms. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Weinberg?
Here.
Mr. Richards?
Here.
Mr. Cotton?
Here.
Ms. Higgins?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Here.
And I am here. We are all here.
Okay. So we have a full board and definitely a quorum. As I said earlier, we'll be talking about student services and curriculum. And with that, I will pass it on to the superintendent. Superintendent?
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. Tonight we have 2 presentations. I think Jim just outlined what we intend to. We're going to start off with curriculum and instruction assessment first. Kim Yarlott and Mary Wilson will do the presentation, and then we'll move on to a presentation by our Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, John Fabrizio. Then questions and whatever in the end. We do have, Jack has a couple of things that we wanted to share with you tonight relative to the status of some of the governor's budget and what the impact of that, just really for food for thought for you tonight. We have that. And then Mr. Richard, I would like to have a non-public at the end of the meeting to discuss a personnel matter.
Certainly.
So with that, go ahead, Kim.
Thank you.
Mary.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us this evening. As you know, this is my first budget presentation to you, and last year Mary Wilson presented a budget to you, and so I'm anticipating any questions that you might have, or corrections, or any mid-course changes that you would like from me or from us. We've put together a presentation that basically outlines curriculum that was initiatives for this year compared to what we're recommending for curriculum initiatives next year, and any budgetary implications. Instruction, anything that falls under instruction this year that were priorities, and then again 2023-24 instructional priorities that have any budgetary implications or that are considered a high priority for us. And then finally assessment with again this year and the coming year, and then just an overall summary. This is probably different than many of the budgets that you've seen where they've been very explicit about dollar amounts, because embedded in curriculum instruction and assessment you have to anticipate costs that have to do with stipends or professional development hours that occur outside of the school day or over the summer. So it's not an exact science, but it will help you be able to see why there's a request for a slight increase in the CIA budget. And Ellen is here as backup because some of the PD falls under Title II funds, and Jack is here also as a backup for any clarifications on things. So we're going to start off by going to showing you a curriculum cycle that Mary created. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Mary?
Sure. I think last year when I showed it to you, it only had implementation and then evaluation, research and then implementation and evaluation. And based on some of the feedback that we had from our strategic plan committee and from our consultant, we realized we needed more detail in this. So you'll see year 1, which was the steering committee would craft the competencies. Year 2, the larger committee, which is what we're in now for social studies and for math. Year 2, the larger committee sees what the steering committee put together for the competencies. Year 3 would start the fact that you approve the competencies, and we'll look at materials to pilot. Year 4 is when the materials will be selected and training and implementation begins. Any questions about that?
Just one. one quick question on, excuse me, on social studies. The state has not updated social studies in quite a while, right?
Correct, and there's nothing on the docket that it's going to be very soon. So we have adopted the C3 national standards
Okay.
to go with, and those competencies.
Okay, thank you.
Some good news that we heard from the governor's budget was that there will be money dedicated to civics, and that's
Yeah, I
a
saw that.
requirement, and so hopefully that will help us with, as we move and create the competencies in civics.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda, did you have?
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the graphic, but I'm finding this to be a little overwhelming.
Yes, so
Um,
you've seen it before in our instructional committee.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard to cut and paste, but I can send you a copy of this slide without it kind of being so mumbled.
Okay, and I guess my question is, are we starting all of these in year one?
No. So as you see, language arts would then start in 2023-24 as their year one.
Okay.
Exploratory, art, music, tech ed, those exploratory classes would start again next year in year one. So
So
it's
some of art, math and social studies have already started.
math and social studies and SEL are
Yeah.
ongoing right now.
Language arts and exploratory classes are starting this year.
Next year, 23-24. You see how it,
Yeah, 23, 24.
yeah.
And then
Following
that.
Yeah, and World Language started over the summer doing their curriculum work, their competency work. So it's in different stages in each one of them.
Okay. So we've started 3 this year.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Can you talk about the evaluation process? Do we implement new curriculum if the current curriculum is working, or how do we just are we evaluating earlier on so that we know if it's not working?
That's why the evaluation is a longer arrow. Again, we had to shrink it down. But the evaluation goes on until that year one starts again with the steering committee. And the evaluation is really the evaluating how that program is impacting student learning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For world languages, I've been noticing like the color coding. Is there a reason the trajectory of it looks a little different? That implementation goes before evaluation rather than after?
So, because they worked on their competencies this summer, they're now implementing it this year. That's why it's kind of in a different spot. They worked as, like, for instance, all the Spanish teachers got together last summer, worked on their curriculum, and now they're implementing what they worked on in the summer. Then they're going to evaluate it after that. Does that make sense? So that's why it's a little bit different. They shrunk it down because they've been working on it for several years in a row. They were ready to do the next step.
Got it. Thank you.
And it's okay that they skip the larger committee formed and the board approves the competencies?
They are using the national competencies for world language, and I believe they already came to you for those national competencies probably 4 years ago, maybe, from what I understood.
So what year are they in now?
They're in implementation of their specific competencies for each of their languages. World language has some national competencies on speaking and listening, conversation, writing, all of that. And they've adopted those national competencies based on, I believe, and I have no idea because it was prior to me. They've just sent me their curriculum materials. So it was prior to me coming on board, so I don't know when the board actually approved that.
We might want them to come forward to the instructional committee at least then and at some point and talk to us about what they're doing. Since
Sure.
It's been within prior to the last 4 years. Thank you.
Up next is another slide that you've seen, and upon my arrival here and my sort of attempt to wrap my head around what was in place, and what did we want to make sure we recognized was part of our curriculum instruction and assessment priorities. So you've seen that, you've seen this slide where we talked about, starting with the orange in the left, the equity work is part of, you'll also see that on the strategic plan. We bought iReady to use at the 5th, 9th, and actually 12th grade level. The credit requirements for graduation was a review process that we went through. All schools reviewing their MTSSB process. We have PLTs, professional learning teams, and data-informed decision-making going on. Continuing clockwise, we have foundations that was implemented at grades 1 and 2, Heggerty, which was implemented at grade K. We're continuing with OGAP, which is math training based on research, best practices. High school is continuing with UDL, which is the Universal Design for Learning model that's already in place and is a current initiative. Beaver Meadow School is piloting an SEL program called Fly 5. Continuing around, we have the staff review proposed math, SEL, social studies competencies K through 12, which has been the work that we've been doing all throughout this year. And grades 6 through 8 has been working with NHLI on aligning their competencies and adopting a strategic goals for curriculum instruction and assessment. So these are kind of the high level priorities for this year. Yes.
It would be great to get a jargon version of this that explains what OGAP is and Heggerty into,
Yep.
I'm assuming ELA may be English language arts, but
Yep.
maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if it's gobbledygook for me and probably others here, I think it's probably a lot of hard to understand for the public
Yep.
too.
Yeah, the acronyms, you have to become acronym savvy in this job. Initials and acronyms.
Just a question on the color coding, if you will. Can you tell me why some of them are orange and some of them are blue and some of them are green? I mean,
Okay, so the blue has to do with curriculum.
okay.
The green is kind of big overarching work that has to do with like curriculum revisions, essentially.
Okay.
The orange are initiatives that have to do with sort of the I guess more the school-based activities that were taking place. So, for example, we're working on PLTs. It's happening at Runlit. The SEL MTSSB, which is multi-tiered systems of support.
That one I know,
And
but
the B is,
PLC
the
I
B
don't
is
know.
the behavior. And,
What is
yeah,
PLT?
so, and again, this was just a
The
map that I created.
MTSSB.
No,
Yeah.
PLT.
Oh,
The
PLT.
Professional learning teams,
Professional learning.
yeah. So I'll be getting into some of these in more specifics as we go along.
And we do have some spelt out later on,
Yep.
Pam, so that
Thank you.
you have that.
So this year, the priority, as mentioned, was to look at the math curriculum, look at the social studies curriculum, and looking at the social emotional learning, or otherwise SEL curriculum. We are in really good stages with that, with possible presentations for adoption to the school board, May, June timeline for math and social studies. We've decided to push the social emotional learning curriculum review out another year because we still have a lot of work to do with that. So that was the priority for this year, based on curriculum. The proposal for next year going forward, and I want to mention anything that's highlighted in yellow means that there's a cost associated with it. So our proposal for next year in terms of curriculum development and revisions is to continue to work with the social emotional learning, SEL, continue to revise. Again, this is what you're going to see from that initial slide about that timeline. So up next is the world language curriculum, continue to update those competencies. Work on the English language arts, which is otherwise known as ELA. So delve into the alignment of materials and instructions. And the exploratory classes, which, that's the art, music, PE type of courses that will put together a steering committee for developing competencies. So again, cost that might be associated with any kind of curriculum development and revisions would be for committee work and any professional development associated with that, as well as a portion of Mary Wilson's salary, as she has taken a lead in much of this.
And is this K through 12? Like, all, or is, okay.
Well,
Yes.
world language curriculum
Obviously,
is
it's middle school, high
middle
school.
school and high
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
English language arts will be K through
Okay.
12, and social emotional learning is pre-K through 12. Exploratory classes would be K through 12.
Okay.
And LM's elementary?
K through 12, so yeah. Yeah.
No, ELEM, elementary.
That will
Correct.
include, yep,
Oh,
pre-K
okay.
through 12, yep.
Do you have any estimated costs on those stipends and salaries?
You'll
Later
see
on
that
we
later
do.
on in the overview. So, again, continuing with curriculum specifically, this year we purchased Heggerty, which is a phonemic awareness program that we put into kindergarten. You've seen a presentation on that in the past to the instructional committee and to the board. And for the 2023-24, the proposal is to bring Heggerty into grade 1 at a cost of approximately $8,000 for the materials. The reason for that is that we have found that the phonemic awareness program or curriculum is really beneficial for students in terms of their early literacy instruction. Foundations, which is a phonics program we bought. It's a program curriculum, and we bought that this year for grades 1 and 2. We've had a lot of success with that, and at the recommendation of the principals and the reading specialists, we'd like to purchase that for grade 3. That's as high as Foundations goes. It's an early literacy program, so it doesn't go any higher than 3rd grade. But at the recommendation of the reading specialists, that's at a cost of about $50,000, which includes professional development. Yes.
Thank you. The foundations, it says phonics, and I'm still very limited in my knowledge of like how we teach reading in the early grades, but I understand that we're really heavily focused on Fontes and Pinnell as a foundation. Am I correct in that understanding?
In the past, it has been, and this year and last year, the effort has really been to push some more phonics in to create a better balance in terms of the instruction.
Okay, that's
So-
great news.
So this
I'm
is,
happy to
and
hear that.
You know, you're old when you started in the district, it was very phonetically based and well-rounded, and then it all went to none of it. You did
Yeah.
it in secret, and now it's back.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see that this
Yeah.
program is
Yeah,
being
this is-
implemented. It's
Yeah,
a
me
good
too, as an
improvement.
LD specialist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
letters are what
so
they say.
phonics is really how you break down and read sounds and chunk sounds, and phonemic awareness is more of the phonological processing. So both of those together, tethered together and used really strongly daily at the lower levels is really the hope that we have a better balance in our
Great.
instruction.
Thank you.
Runlet Middle School, this is again 2023, 22-23. They did a pilot of Open Up Resources, which was the algebra program that they've used.
And grade 8.
And,
Grade 8 also is piloting
well,
grade
Runlet
it.
Middle School.
Yeah.
And grade 8.
And grade 8 for Open Up Resources.
Okay.
And that's one of the materials that perhaps we'll be looking at for math.
And Beaver Meadows School is piloting a five social emotional learning program, which has a 3-year commitment, and that is grant funded.
And each of these costs are annual, correct?
So the cost that I'm proposing for next year.
For Haggerty and Foundations.
Haggerty and Foundations, there'll be minimal ongoing cost to those in
Oh,
terms
it's
of
one time.
materials. This is
Got
gonna
it.
be training and the initial purchase, but there are some related returning costs on them for any kind of consumables.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so, again, there'll be some professional development that might end up having to occur. However, the professional development is purchased as part of that $50,000. It's embedded in that. So it's more if something had to happen, it's unanticipated, if something had to happen after school or over the summer. So now I wanted to be even more explicit and just remind you, you've seen this slide before, but what is phonemic awareness? It's the ability to understand that spoken words are made up of individual sound called phonemes, and when it's one of the best early predictors for reading success.
Kim, can I just go back for a second?
I'm sorry?
On the training, where are we with training? Who's already had Haggerty and Foundations, and who still needs it, and when, and will it meet the 23-24 timeline?
So the Haggerty, all kindergarten teachers across the district were trained this last year.
Okay.
And Foundations, all grade 1 and 2 teachers were trained this last year, at the very beginning of the school year, so that they could start the year off right away using the programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hope is that we would do the same for Haggerty and Foundations for grade 1 and grade 3 next year.
And kindergarten has already been using Foundations, so they did not need any more training or materials.
So it's doable to get that training done in the summer, so you can prepare.
It'll
for
either happen
September.
in the summer or right at the start of the school year.
Okay.
We do have capacity within our buildings. We have our reading specialists are really trained. They're not trainers, but they're trained and have enough awareness to get, if we had to do a little bit of a delay in their training. But it will have minimal impact. It's quick. So we talked about what Haggerty is doing, is helping early readers with their phonemic awareness, helping to bring a more balanced approach to our literacy instruction. And Foundations is put out by Wilson, and it's very systematic and multi-sensory structured language curriculum. It's and again, that's another one that only goes up to K through 3, and it's really highly focused on spelling patterns, and phonics. So it's more those letter sounds as opposed to how you hear sounds.
Is this something that would be used by all students in the classroom?
Yes.
Up to 3rd grade?
Yes.
Okay. So even if they're above grade level, they'll still use this more for their patterns and spelling?
Yes,
and-
yeah, because you can advance it, you can differentiate within the program.
Okay.
So we're just bringing context to those 2 purchases. So if there's no more clarification on the curriculum part, I will move into the instruction. And if any questions, just please come back to me. So again, I'm going to start with what's happened this year. In terms of major instructional priorities, this does not hit upon everything, but a major instructional priority was at Concord High School for them to use, and you saw this earlier, Pam, when you were like, or I'm not sure who was it that said, you gotta get, tell me about these, the abbreviations. So here you go. Universal Design for Learning, it's commonly referred to as UDL. New Hampshire CAST, C-A-S-T, has trainers for UDL, and it's free. There's no cost to it, and it's basically a program or sort of an instructional approach where you scan your room and look for any kind of barriers that might be in place for students to access their education or information. So you would do a scan. So in other words, you might say, well, this particular student is hard of hearing, so I need to make sure that I have some amplification in this part of the room. This student might be visually impaired. I need to make sure that I have a larger font. It might be that this particular student has an attentional disability, so you might want to make sure that that student is particularly close to the teacher. It's all of those accommodations and good teaching practices that we put in place to make sure that students are able to access the curriculum and instruction. So
It's also planning ahead of time for all of the variability in the classroom for kids who are perhaps English language learners, making sure that they can access the curriculum as well. It's also making sure that kids who are maybe fragile for the moment have a way to access the curriculum. So are they ready for learning, and how can we accommodate that? So it takes in consideration all of that.
And it's been around for a while. The high school were early adopters, and our hope is that we can eventually have the whole district, all the teachers be trained in UDL practices. In particular, we'd like to bring it to the middle school next year. And again, there's no cost other than if PD happens or occurs outside of the school day. Project-based learning, otherwise known as PBL, that's a teaching method that has to do with real-world kind of meaningful projects that students engage in that are multidisciplinary. Might be some major unit that students work on, or an approach to learning through any kind of, just again, like real-world STEM activities. We have a lot of people who are trained at the high school. They've made this a priority, and the cost has been associated with professional development. We have a staff member who's trained as a PBL trainer, so he's been providing the training to staff. And also at the high school, they've been working on restorative justice. That's a theory of justice that focuses on mediation when there's behavioral infractions rather than punitive actions towards any kind of, behavioral infractions. It's kind of it's a theory and an approach to addressing behaviors. The cost was $60,000 out of Title IV-A in the summer of 2024. And we have a lot of staff that are trained now at the high school who can act as kind of train-the-trainer models going forward as we bring restorative justice perhaps at the next level at the middle school.
I know previously we contracted with Suffolk
Yep.
University, and Dr. Herbert also, I know, has his doctoral degree in this. So is he overseeing, or are we still continuing to contract with Suffolk as well, or both, I guess?
Well, as you can see, the contract runs through the summer of 2024, so we still have some money in that contract.
Is it with Suffolk?
It is
Oh,
with
okay.
Suffolk University.
Got it. Thank you.
Great, good news.
They also now have, through part of Title IV, that activity, they also have a restorative justice coordinator who's, the whole idea behind it is to really focus on Concord High, but then make it a K-12 initiative.
Thank you.
And that runs also through summer 2024.
Continuing with the high school, they've been working on competency-based instruction, and that has to do with the competencies, which is both the transfer of student knowledge and proficiencies towards their competency grading, and that cost has been only professional development. So that highlights the Concord High School instructional priorities for this year. It doesn't hit upon everything, but it gives you an overview. Runlet Middle School, and this is, you're kind of seeing this for a second time because, to your point, Mr. Cotton, you said to me, when I had that cycle, this is what I was able to glean from initiatives that were in place. So I'm just reiterating what's going on as priorities. So for Runlet Middle School, they've been working on competencies. We did New Hampshire Learning Initiative, and HLI provides really comprehensive professional development around competencies. So we continue to contract with them. That was in the sum of approximately $55,000, which will run through this rest of this school year. And I funded that out of the professional development account. Runlet Middle School is also working on PLCs, which is sometimes called PLTs. They kind of go back and forth. It's professional learning communities or professional learning teams. And that's an instructional practice whereby educators come together sometimes weekly, maybe every other week. They share their student performance data. In particular, this year they do it with math. We talked about how Project C goes into the classrooms and helps relieve the teachers so they can meet as a professional learning team. They set goal for the year. They analyze their instructional practices. They analyze their student performance, and then based on that analysis, make adjustments to their instructional practices. It's a internationally known process to have educators come out of silos and work together, whereby all first grade teachers own all first grade students. It's a very collaborative approach. This cost of this was about $31,500, and that came out of ESSER II funds, and it's good through June 2023.
So would you anticipate that there will be funds necessary for next year beyond June?
Well, we may have to. We're trying to actually do some for our March 17th PD day. We're trying to get everybody as a PLC in their grade level or their content level to show them what a PLC looks like, feels like, is like, so that perhaps we can cut that down a little bit so that we can actually do most of that in-house. We're hoping.
We're hoping to do it in-house, and when if we have educators who are kind of one-off, we can send them to PLC training. So I don't anticipate needing the consultant to this degree going forward.
Okay, thanks.
Can I get clarification on, is that, so they're already doing the PLCs, but with
Well,
a coordinator or with
So there's a coordinator who's been hired from New Hampshire Learning Initiative, focusing on Runlet Middle School. However, we've tried to grow the capacity a little bit so that more schools have access to the consultants this year. So our goal is that every school is a professional learning community school.
Okay,
It's happening really well in some buildings, and it's just at the beginning in some other of the buildings. Our goal is to be able to have maximize the professional learning community model at all buildings.
by the end of this year.
Well, I don't think we're gonna meet that goal by the end of this year, so there'll be some training that will need to take place
So-
going forward.
You will see a budget item for this at some point, maybe, perhaps. or
At
with-
some point perhaps, or it can happen internally. I myself am able to train persons, and if we have to bring a consultant in, it will be minimal amount, or we send people out for professional development.
But this
This-
here is already happening.
This is still 2022-23.
Right, okay.
Thanks.
And continuing on with instruction for 2022-23, at the K through 5 schools, as mentioned before, an instructional practice is the implementation of Heggerty and Foundations, how it is that you are teaching phonics and phonemic awareness in the classroom, and that has had professional development associated with it. So again, I'm still working with what's going on this year. The other thing that has been going on this year is OGAP training, which is the ongoing assessment project. The ongoing assessment project originated out of Vermont, and it's basically a group of highly talented mathematicians who have looked at best practices in math instruction, mathematical theories, mathematical practices. And Chantel is a trainer for OGAP. She's been training interested teachers in grades K through 8 for the last several years. This year, we're really focusing on additives, multiplicative, and fractions. And we have a whole cohort going through this. It's Chantel's hope that she can run 2 cohorts next year. And funding for that would come out of Title II. And the K through 5 schools have also been getting some training with the competencies. Again, this is that NHLI grant that you saw earlier. Actually not a grant, this was paid for out of PD. We've been trying to expand the consultants to work with not only Runlet Middle School, but to work with other grade levels to develop curriculum and look at instructional practices around competencies. So again, this is an overview of what's happened this year, and my next slide will be what I will propose or what we're proposing for the following year. So are there any questions about the priority instructional areas for this year? Okay. So what we have identified as priorities for next year in the area of instruction is to continue providing professional development on competencies. That will mostly occur through professional development in an area where Mary and I have the capacity to do that professional development. The PBL that you saw earlier, project-based learning, is something that we would like to expand from not only just at the high school, but to provide professional development K through 12. And again, that's not a heavy lift. It's really teaching teachers how to use projects to stimulate learning and inquiry. Restorative justice, again, that's happened at the high school this year. We'd like to, in particular, move it next to the middle school, and then hopefully a K through 12 approach. And that monies would be coming from Title IV-A for any kind of professional development for that.
And is the in-district coordinator a existing staff member, or is it outsourcing?
It's a higher position.
Higher
Right,
position.
yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Part-time.
Again, you saw UDL earlier, the Universal Design for Learning. It's, a fabulous kind of theory about how it is that we reach all learners, and we would like to expand that. And there will be some professional development costs associated with it, but likely very, very little, because most of their training happens during the day, or they send trainers to the schools to be on site to provide the training. So minimal cost that would be anticipated.
There may be some cost with getting subs for them to go to a professional development during the contracted day. So that, again, would be part of the cost.
And professional learning communities, PLCs, we talked about maybe having some contracted time through NHLI. Nonetheless, myself and Mary are capable of training and continuing this initiative. It really we just sort of have to dipstick and see where every single building is in their understanding. It's not just a meeting. It's not just teachers getting together while someone else is teaching their class to talk or to plan. That's not what it is. It has to do with deep dives into data, shared data, and brainstorming about next steps for instruction. So it's an approach that is very intentional. So we want to make sure that the rollout has the highest impact for students and for teachers. Any questions about instructional proposals for next year priorities?
I have there's an awful lot of professional development throughout this presentation. Do we have enough professional development days for the staff and all to be able to do this?
Nope. Nope.
How are we going to assess
So,
this?
we will have to be creative. We do have some curriculum times that are after school, and we have some in, professional development days. And when we do have professional development days, one of the things that we made sure this year was that we remember that big loop that I showed you? If it didn't fall in that loop, we weren't gonna do it on a professional development day, because those days are way too valuable. So it has to fall under whatever our priorities are. Any professional development has to fall into those areas for those common days that we're all learning together. Otherwise, it would have to be some after-school time or some in school and having substitutes available.
Okay, and do you call out anywhere how much we'll be paying for substitutes and for that time in this budget or in this particular presentation?
We didn't figure substitutes, but you'll see a slide later on about the stipends.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we're going on to assessment, and this is just a highlight of what happened with assessment this year. Do you want to speak to this, Mary?
Sure. So we've been Chantel's been working on common assessments K through 5. That's one of the things that she does with that Project C model. The middle school, I've been working with the middle school on common assessments, and especially with algebra and the high school together. So we have agreed on 3 common assessments this year for the algebra, 1 students in the middle school and the high school to take so that we can compare results. So we're taking that next step to make sure that they're aligned together. Again, world language, with the exception of French, all of the world, you asked a question earlier that I failed to answer on world language. Why did they skip a step? Because all the world language teachers saw all the curriculum already. We didn't have to have a bigger committee to look at it, because all the teachers were involved in doing that curriculum work. Okay, so, and they are still tweaking their assessments. They worked on it during the summer, and they're still tweaking their assessments now. So they're going to continue probably this summer as well. Social studies, we have worked on common assessments, but specifically that civics assessment that is a new state law. We purchased and implemented iReady. Do you want to speak to that, or?
Sure. This also went to the instructional committee. iReady was in place. iReady is a universal diagnostic screener that determines students' abilities in math and in reading. And it was being used at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And upon my arrival, in speaking with John Fabrizio and Mary Wilson, we really wanted to have bookends to Runlet so that we could preview how the students are performing before they enter Runlet. And likewise, at ninth grade, teachers would be able to have a quick early assessment to determine the students' abilities in math and reading. It's proven to be very, very helpful. You asked recently about some data that shows improvement. We have at the 5th grade through 8th grade improvement universally, district-wide in both math and reading, which is a slide I can share with you at another date. So this has really proven to be very, very fruitful, particularly at the high school, working with some of the students who are in the ELL population, really trying to progress monitor how they're doing in terms of their acquisition of reading skills. So you'll see later on, our proposal is to perhaps bring it into 4th grade as well, so that we have even more longitudinal data to review.
We developed with our assessment coordinator and our reading specialists and Chantel an assessment calendar for this year, and we would assume that we would be doing the same thing for next year. Our leadership team met with all the schools to review the data. We do that 3 times a year. We are in the process of doing the winter data dives. We did the fall data dives. They went really well. People were really excited about doing this again in the district. Apparently it went away for a long time, and now we're bringing it back. So they're real excited about looking at their data and getting excited about the growth that they see with their kids. And then, of course, we'll do another one in the spring. We purchased Saber's assessment for our SEL screening tool, which is now in the process of being implemented throughout the district. I believe the high school implemented it first, the middle school went next, and then we're taking it down to the elementaries.
They're not there yet, though.
They've done their first screening.
So, I can speak to that because I worked on this with Janine last year to put this in place. We started in the elementary. They did their first one because we hit them first, really our youngest learners. The high school, we are right now just about to do our first screener. It's going to happen very shortly. Very hard to figure out schedules at the high school on how and where do you give it because kids move so much. Elementary, we know where they are all day long. It's a much more direct process. Now trying to figure out our class list. How do we give it to make sure we hit all students, and how do we do it? It's teacher directed. The teacher actually does a survey, not the kids. So it's a survey that the teachers all do about the kids in their class. And when you have multiple students, you can imagine in a high school how to pinpoint which students we're giving the assessment to. So that's almost done, and we're almost about to launch that very soon.
I'd be interested in finding out what the results of your data dives are, perhaps not after each one, but as a culminating time, perhaps in April or May, whenever is a good time, and sort of a encapsulation of how each grade is doing and
We
what they're
did that
doing.
last year, so we'll do that again this year.
Perfect.
Yep, we'd love to share that information. It's exciting.
Good, thank you.
So now I'm going into assessment proposals for 2023, 2024. We want to continue the annual license of Sabers, which will cost $12,000. Is that, do you know what fine, Ellen?
Well, it will, it will continue to be, we don't have a plan for that.
Okay.
Is
That's
that an
part of the-
additional 12,000 or 12,000 we're already paying and we're continuing to pay?
Yeah, it was 12,000 last year, it'll be 12,000 next year. It's a continuing item.
Well, it was 29.5 last year.
Yeah, that was training, and there's a lot more implementation to that, but this would be part of it. This would be a budget item that needs a line item.
That is a good question, though, that Ms. Walsh asked. If any of it is new monies, that would be helpful to clarify. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is new money?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Oh.
Yep.
Well-
Because it was paid for by a grant previously?
Correct.
Okay, and you're looking to move it to local dollars?
Probably the professional development budget, we'll have to wait and see what line item, but likely the professional development budget.
Are these in your budget already that we were getting, or?
Yes,
Okay.
it's the proposed budget, that amount that we're asking for as a bottom line. If we were to bring iReady into fourth grade and continue it with grades 5 through 9, the new cost would be approximately $70,000, be $69,080. It's a little bit more expensive when you're adding a grade because there's professional development that is wrapped into the cost. And it comes with a lot of days. It's about 8 days of professional development. But it can be broken up into time slots, so it doesn't have to happen as over 8 days.
Is it 69,080 to add fourth grade, or is?
No, that's the total
So
for,
we have to pay this every year, but it may go up because we'd be adding a new grade.
every year,
Every
hopefully.
year.
Well,
It costs more to add a grade. Once we settle on the grade spans, it will be a more reasonable cost because it won't include the PD that's associated with it.
And this is new money because ESSER paid for this before. Is that correct?
It was, well, iReady was also, was paid out of the general fund for Runlet previously. The differential for, to add,
I see,
35
31,000.
and, exactly, yeah,
Okay.
was ESSER, yeah.
So is the cost of this program 31,000, around that every year, plus adding a new grade? Is that why? What would we expect to pay every year if we were to continue this?
that 31,000 also had the PD in it from last year. Was it last year? It was 31,000, also had some PD in it. So it would be significantly less when we finally get all the training done.
We had to do new training last year for
The-
5th grade and for 9th grade.
Well, this says, addition to grade 4 and then 5 through 9, it's 70,000 for this year. But it was 55 last year. for
So
grade.
the
For
difference
grade.
between last year and this year is the cost of fourth grade and the training for fourth grade.
But the training for fourth grade costs more than the training for 5th through 9th grade?
No, we're continuing the training for another year for fifth through ninth.
It would be really helpful to me on all of this is what's ongoing, what's professional development, what's the long-term plan, and where all this fits in your actual budget. So you asked for an $89,000 increase in professional development, I believe, to bring it up to about $170,000 because we put in 80 last year. So where is that $170,000 going from local funds? What other is happening with other funds? And how does it all mesh together? And if we're adding curriculum programs, a very similar list, and what's one time versus what's long term. Because I'm finding this very hard to follow, I'm sorry. It's very interesting, but it's very hard to follow in terms of like putting together a budget.
Yeah, it's not as clean and neat as, other areas because really the professional development's really hard to predict. Sometimes it's whether or not teachers volunteer to sign up to do it, or if you have new teachers, it might be that you have to really target a certain group of teachers. So I understand that it could be much more concrete, and I can work on making it more concrete. I do have backups for these because these quotes are quotes that we've gotten from the particular venues. So we can work on that. Wouldn't you say, Jack?
One of the other problems we had was that we were using funds from ESSER in Title II and Title IV. And so when those, especially ESSER, is reduced, obviously you know that, then we had a problem. It had to come over to the operational side of the budget.
The other problem we have is that you can see where we are. It's not like it's all happening to everybody at the same time. You can see everybody is in different stages. You know, this year 5 through 9 with the assessment, iReady. And we know that we wanted to add another grade, which makes a lot of sense. So those teachers can monitor their progress. So part of the money is there that we've had, that we used. We used part of the money from ESSER, from every grant we could find, to making sure that it was represented in the budget. So I think if we show you that in some kind of a Excel spreadsheet, what came from grants, what's operational, what did we have last year, and what new money are we asking for this year?
That would be very helpful.
Right, we'll get you that.
You know,
We'll get you that.
Just looking at iReady, like, I can't, I don't get the explanation of why it costs more next year, like, so how many more 5th through 9th grade teachers do we have to train? And when do we train, when do we have people train? Are we training every teacher, or are we training the trainers? You know.
So we're training every teacher, every educator is being trained, and this will happen before the start of the school year, as it did this last year. Did the training feel a little bit rushed for educators? I have to say yes. Is there a willingness for all educators to come in over the summer for training? No. So in order to ensure that all 5th grade teachers and 9th grade ELA teachers and math teachers received the training, we front-loaded it at the beginning of the year and then embedded professional development training throughout the year. And there's still some more professional development training to happen at 5th grade, because we didn't purchase the entire program. We didn't purchase the instructional part of it, which is basically after the students take the assessment, iReady has, for an extra cost, this instructional program where they give you recommendations for interventions and extensions for students. We didn't feel that the 5th grade teachers were ready for that this year. We just wanted them to get familiar with the assessment. But when you bundle the assessment and the instructional program into iReady for 5th grade, it is at a higher cost.
And that would be helpful to see listed out.
Okay.
You know, because I'm looking at this as $55,000 last year for grades 5 through 9, $69,000 this year to add grade 4 and maybe some training. But it's also not just training now. I'm hearing
It's the instructional component.
and that doesn't show up anywhere
Yeah,
there.
and we have the invoice, which we can also break down for you as a backup.
So just,
thank you.
I think as Ms. Walsh said, just sort of breaking it down
Sure.
for us so we know what those things mean.
Sure.
So we know what we're getting for that 69,000.
Absolutely, yep. And Mary might be able to pull that up right now in just a moment. We'd like to purchase a kindergarten screener, which is for our incoming kindergarten students, to be able to determine where they are at as they come into kindergarten. This is an approximate price from the company Dial. It's a very quick, easy assessment that looks at motor skills, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, early literacy skills, and it helps to identify any at-risk students right from the start before they begin school. The screening happens over the summer. That would be an approximate amount at this point, because this is a very recent ask on the part of the teachers for this summer. Very
We don't have
recent.
anything like that now? We don't do any screening?
Every building, two buildings piloted the Dial screener last year, but I'm asking that they all have a screener across the district, that we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples and not having schools using different screeners to determine at-risk students. So in order for us to be aligned at the 4 lower elementary schools, we would purchase this screening, and it comes with a screening kit for every screener. So if you're a kindergarten teacher, you need your own. If you're an OT, you need your own kit. If you're a speech and language person, you need your own. Anyone who is doing the screening needs to operate off of their own kit. So one of the reasons why it might not be an exact number is because I haven't received from all the schools the number of kits that they may need. Again, it was piloted at 2 schools last year, and they've agreed that this will be a great common assessment for incoming kindergarten students. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add. This is something, again, you know my world of special education and standardized assessments. I kind of believe in it. And when Discovery last year coming on, there was one thing I was talking to a couple of the principals, and they didn't like the tool they had. And I'm familiar with the speed dial. It's a good measure. and we piloted it just to say what do we think, and it was pretty well received by the educators that used it. So I think we did it the right way. We tried it out, we saw it, we compared it with the tool we currently had, and said it seems to be more standardized information across the whole district. So it was time to move forward and look at putting it in place.
It's often used at preschool level too. I'm not sure if you said that.
And does Millbrook share the screeners with, kindergarten? Never mind, ignore me. Ignore my question. Figured it out.
So will this $5,000 come with an agreement that next year it's going to be an additional 5,000 or
No, once you have
additional
the kits,
money?
once you have the kits, you have the kits, but there is an online component that we'd have to repeatedly renew, online component to it.
And do we know the cost of that?
No, not yet. It's not a lot. I want us, it's very little. Each kit is about $450, and then there's another couple of $100 associated with the online per educator.
A quick question about what I think I'm interpreting as we have a lot of subscription service type situations here. And I'm just curious from a budget standpoint, if we commit to multi-year, subscriptions, are there discounts associated with that rather than coming back to us year after year to annually re-up? Are there discounts to be had for longer term commitments?
I know with some, yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
sure.
So, yes, there is. A couple things we do. One is, if I can get a discount by prepaying up front, I will do that if I know it's gonna go the length. The other thing is, if I can I will commit to locking in lower prices for multiple years if they'll agree to add a non-appropriation clause, which means if I bring it to you and you vote it down, I don't have to pay it, I'm out. That's how we handle it.
Thank you.
And some of these line items have been under the software account in the past, so we're trying to look at what belongs under curriculum instruction and assessment and what would belong under the technology. So it is a moving target a bit, but I feel that the kindergarten screener really should be under the CIA budget. This summer, we hope to put together a report card committee to look at report cards.
Jim had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to ask the question and follow on to what Ms. Meeker said, and that is, these are subscription services, so I assume these are replacing something, and if those are subscription services, is there a savings? Because we won't be spending that? Or is
Go
this
ahead,
addition on top of whatever we've had in the past?
So what we had in the past was more of a homegrown, best way to explain it. It was developed by the preschool and kindergarten teachers to what they use to look at fine motor, gross motor, academic skills, social emotional well-being, things like that. It was more self-developed. The thing about those assessments, they're not always standardized. They're not always scoring, it's not always equal, things like that. So this particular speed dial is an additional, it's replacing a homegrown program that was done by a lot of individuals that may not even be here that created it now. So it's kind of time to put something more standardized in place.
Thank you.
And also under assessment, a priority for the 2023-2024 year is to put together a committee to look at and revise our reporting system, our report cards. They aren't aligned right now to the curriculum and the programs, so that would be some stipends that would be associated with that work this summer.
Is that associated for all grades, or is it specific where you're targeting certain?
K through 8.
K through 8, thank you.
And again, I'm interpreting your feedback as that I know that you would really like a spreadsheet with showing what's grants, what's ongoing, and what will actually come out of the $150,000. And this is more of an overview of what we've been working on this year and anticipate working on next year, as opposed to a really clean budget, which we can get for you.
It would also be good to see the same for what you're planning to purchase in curriculum, not just the professional development money, but, sort of all of the stuff, we talked about.
You mean like if we're adding foundations to grade
Yeah,
3,
yeah.
you want to see that costs $10,000.
Yeah, ongoing,
Yeah, what the ongoing is.
Okay. Okay, yep. Okay, thanks. That's great feedback. Just wanted to give you an overview of what some of the initiatives were for this, preceding our actual, budgetary breakdown. So for professional development, major initiatives that we anticipate for the 2022-2023 year, which would have some associated costs. We've mentioned before that we want to continue with the universal design for learning. That's at no cost. We want to continue to build out a K through 12 comprehensive competency curriculum that's based on competencies, K through 12. We would likely have some contracted services with that. We have not looked out in the field yet to find out any kind of contractor for that at this point. It's also something that Mary and I are capable of doing, so if we had to not contract it out, we could do that. A part of our strategic plan is to really look at equity and diversity. And so we would like to work with New Hampshire Listens and look at some funds for continuing that work in the summer. Oh, I'm sorry, this is 2023, 22, 23. So this year's funds, sorry. This is what we've already expended. We're working on, for professional development, we've worked at the PBL, which is the project-based learning. There's been no cost associated with that. At the beginning of the year, we hired Dr. Allison Roy, and she did a presentation on trauma-informed instruction, which was $3,000 out of Title II. This last year, we've been doing the OGAP training, that's the math training, and that has had a very small amount of money associated with it.
For the books out of Title II. However, we did you also saw before the OGAP training was $26,000 out of another grant. We will continue to support OGAP training, and it probably should be out of Title II.
And other professional development that we worked on this year had to do with mandated compliance trainings. And those are things such as Title IX training, no tell training, bullying, suicide prevention, those types of mandated trainings.
And to clarify, under equity and diversity, do we have any line items for that specifically under here?
So this is this year.
It was for
this
this
year,
correct?
this year. I'm sorry, I confused you a little bit. This is 2022-23. And that contract came out of Title II funds last summer.
Is there anything that should be replacing that, or that we are going to be looking at within the budget? I guess my question is.
The directors.
Yeah, the director's salary and
Oh,
his budget.
I didn't know if
whatever that
we were
budget
looking
would
at
be.
continuing the contract at all. That was the question.
Right, his position is
Okay.
something that you have to decide on. It's not in this, it's not in here, the director, and as you know, we are looking to wean the expenditures of for the UNH project, right, for New Hampshire Listens. We're looking to wean away from them, and we now have a director for diversity. He'll be doing that work.
Okay, and I'm sorry to confuse you. I jumped ahead and back. So this was our initiatives this year. And continuing with that, we did the CRAZE training, which was the safety training at all the buildings, done through Matt Cashman, and there was no cost to that. And the SABRS, we offered professional development training. There was no cost to that. And we did the restorative justice training, which was grant funded, which we spoke about earlier, which was associated with Suffolk University. You saw a cost associated with that earlier in this presentation. And with the purchase of Foundations and Hegarty, the bottom line for those had embedded PD in the purchase. Now I will go to next year. These are areas where we would like to focus on for professional development. We want to make sure that our grade 1 teachers are fully trained with Hegarty. Our grade 3 teachers are fully trained with Foundations. The purchase of iReady at grade 4, and any new teachers that they would receive training. Again, that training is embedded in the cost of iReady, so it's not a new cost. Likewise with Foundations and Hegarty, it's embedded in the cost of the programs. We continue with restorative justice, moving it to the Runlet Middle School. We don't anticipate any associated costs with that other than maybe potential professional development. Keep ongoing awareness around social emotional learning and wellness, student wellness. Keep that as an initiative for professional development. And the equity and diversity, ongoing training with that. Universal design for learning, at the very least, get it into Runlet Middle School, and then hope to expand it going down into K through 12. The OGAP, again, that's math training. We're looking at doing 2 trainings over the summer with a new cohort of math teachers, and then we have the new report card K through 8. Now, but I don't have, this is an overview of professional development initiatives. So if we were to go back to the first slide where I had all those bubbles, this is where you'd see all those bubbles and say, if it doesn't fall in this bubble, then we can't afford it. This is where the professional development cost expenditures need to fall under these titles, these programs.
I could be mixing up my acronyms, but UDL has been around for a long time.
Yes.
Concord's done it in the past. We've had UDL training.
That I'm not aware of.
I feel like it was a different.
Was it understanding by design?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was
UBD.
un-
That's what
you-
it is.
UBD.
Called UBD,
You-
but
you
it's
did.
the same
Different.
thing.
No.
It's not the
It's
same.
not the same thing?
No. UBD is taking planning and working backwards from what you want students to know to your small lessons, right? Universal Design for Learning is planning with the student barriers in mind. It's different.
Okay.
I was the same way. I was like, wait a minute, I feel like I've done this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, now that you think of it, I did UBD when I was in Concord, and it's a curriculum, it's a system and ways that you approach curriculum design with the end in mind, and then you build backwards.
And
It's
this is looking more at the individual students,
Universal Design for Learning is looking at instruction.
instruction.
How it's delivered and.
Yes,
Right, okay,
yeah,
yeah.
where UBD is looking at curriculum design.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, just for further clarification, universal design is really about the physical environment and how students are accessing?
No, it's really about all barriers.
Okay, all right,
All barriers for student access to learning.
okay,
Any student, any learning.
sounds good.
These are things that we anticipate or hope to happen over the summer in terms of committees and initiatives. And I put an estimate to the number of hours I anticipate. So as part of our strategic plan, we want to develop a portrait of a learner, and we anticipate that being about 40 hours. Mary and I would head that up.
Okay.
A portrait of a learner would be essentially looking at what are the essential skills and competencies that we want all students to have pre-K through 12 that we are going to help to foster at every grade level. So let's just take, for example, if one of the things came out that we want students to be, resilient and persistent in their learning, then we would say, well, what does that look like and sound like in preschool, 5th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade? How are we fostering those skills? And so we will work on having that, and then that will stand as pillars to our curriculum and instruction.
In my limited experience, developing a portrait of a learner is a multi-year process. So the 40 hours seems like a little small to me. So I'm curious about where the ideals for the portrait of the learner are being developed. Is it within the administrative unit? Was it amongst?
No,
or-
we asked the strategic planning, those focus groups already, that question. If you were part of that focus group, you probably remember that question about what are the skills that you think a graduate should have. And so we're taking that information and building upon that for the portrait of a learner.
Okay, can I follow up on that? Is there additional plans for public involvement in the process, or is that sort of we had our focus groups?
No,
the
we'll send it
community has
back out.
spoken?
We'll send it back out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We have a lot of information from surveys already, which Kathleen can speak to. Okay. Okay.
You know, in addition to that, we had about 20 focus groups, Sarah, that when we developed the strategic plan. In addition to that, we sent out a survey to families. We received 400 or 500 responses to the survey, and we used that data to build the strategic plan. And it also gave us the insight to the third question we asked is, what does a graduate look like?
Okay, thank you.
We also like to convene our social studies and math committees so that we can look at any recommended materials, texts that might come out of the new curriculum. We anticipate 40 hours for the OGAP training, reminder that that's the math training. We would like to see, and again, this is a little bit nebulous because it depends on volunteers, but if we can get some teachers trained about restorative justice, of course, we'd be paying them, but if we can get them to agree to some training, it'd be great if we can get it done over the summer. And that kind of speaks to your point, Mr. Richards, about how do you get this professional development done. Likewise, any competency work, if we could focus on Runlet Middle School, and we can continue with that alignment, grades 6 through 12, that would be great, again, dependent on volunteers. Professional Development Committee, that's the committee that myself and Mary lead, and we want to make sure we have a really comprehensive plan going forward next year for all of our professional development days ahead of time. Very, very clear. It was difficult coming in this year, July 1st, and looking at the professional development days and really trying to assess where our priorities were for the use of those days. So we want to have a really concrete plan for the entire year.
And for the 9 staff, it would be helpful to see how it's broken down into the various sections as well.
Yeah, so we estimated our ideal would be to get 9 staff members on each of those committees to represent each grade level and each building. We don't know if we'll be able to get that, but that's our ideal. That's why it's in there that way, as 9 staff members.
So it's 9 for developing a portrait of learner,
Exactly.
9 for report
Yep.
card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct, each of those committees.
Okay.
And Jack-
That's our hope, to
Okay.
get that amount of people.
Yeah.
Jack was helpful with us coming up with this number, helping us come up with this number, and last summer, it was about 70,000. Again, with my position in place for this coming summer, I hope that we can get a little more bang for our buck in terms of professional development that might occur over the summer. Jack, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm good. I'm taking them all in from that standpoint.
Can I just-
What they're gonna need.
I think working with Mary last year, we all know where we were last year. It was a very different place coming off of really, 2 really hard years of coming back from, the pandemic and where we were and teachers were, readjusting in their own lives and school life. I think it was a really different place. This year we've had more of a consistent year, so we're hoping we can get to some of more of these things this summer. It was hard last summer getting to some of this work.
There was still a lot of people who worked last summer, as we outlined before, that they worked on their curriculum. So they did work last summer. I think, though, this is going to be a lot more pinpointed because it's going to, all of this dovetails into our strategic plan. So it's a little bit more focused.
So just in summary, what we've provided you with an overview of is some of the implications, budgetary implications to the curriculum instruction and assessment budget. While it's not written out in an Excel spreadsheet and it's not very comprehensive at this point, it's really an overview of what does it mean to have funding for curriculum instruction and assessment, which prior to Mary coming, there was nothing associated with this budget, and now there was a line item, a very limited line item that we worked with this year. Typically, with districts that are the size of Concord, you would see somewhere in the range of $250,000 to $500,000 in the budget for curriculum instruction assessment. To have that be a 0 line item is quite eye-opening. So here are some of the areas that are impacted that would require some amount of funding in order for us to be able to continue our initiatives around curriculum instruction and assessment. That includes professional development. It includes stipends for committee work that happens after school hours. It includes any kind of assessment purchases that we might do that will enhance our data analysis of student performance. Next year, we anticipate looking at any text or software that might come out of our social studies curriculum that is going to be newly adopted. We have a stipend that goes to all of the professional development school representatives. There's one at each building that would come out of my fund. I believe it's $1,200 per per person at each building. The mentor training and new teacher orientation. I don't know how that was funded in the past, but that certainly should come out of a curriculum instruction and assessment budget. And any book studies that we do to advance our, current pedagogy, which I'm always about doing, would also be, should come out of a curriculum instruction and assessment budget. So in summary, and in a very, very cursory overview, this speaks to the request to increase the CIA budget to $150,000, and knowing that funds can be offset, if applicable, to Title II funds, which we estimate to be about $200,000 next year after the equitable service supplements, services are done, and that we're supplement, not supplanting any type of learning. So when we can, we'll go to the grants.
So,
Thank goodness for those
Well,
grants.
just to clarify though, that it's when we've started the year and we have an adopted budget, if there are opportunities that come up, then we can go to the grants. If the board deems that it is part of the culture of professional development in Concord, then the local budget needs to eat that expense, right? That's what the whole supplement, not supplant rule means. That if it's
Yeah, and just to clarify too, curriculum development has to live in the local
Local
budget.
budget.
It cannot live in any grant. The DOE will not sign off on it.
that's a minimum standard.
Exactly. So there are some things that we know we can't fund through grants. That's why the budget of $150,000.
Things like paying for subs, right? If it's like we're offering this training and these people can't go because they're in the classroom, that would be something we could write into Title II. That would be a great use of those funds to make sure that those educators, the classroom teachers can attend a certain training, things like that.
For piloting programs, would that be an example of supplementing, not supplanting?
Yes.
Okay.
We're testing out, and we do a lot of that right now. Let's try this out, right? Let's try like 5 is a great example. It's funded out of multiple different buckets. The PD portion can be funded out of Title I. We try it out at one school, we see if it works. Great, we like it, we want to adopt it, then it gets brought forward after. And typically, title funds can be used for a 2 to 3 year cycle to pilot. You need that long to get kind of good data to see if it's really something that's worth putting forward into a line item.
Jack, we didn't have a money dedicated to CIA for these items in the summer, but that doesn't mean we didn't do them. I've been on this board long enough that we have PACE and a bunch of other, a lot of summer programs that they did develop. What part of the budget did we put that in previously?
So they would cobble together between contingency funds
Yeah,
or book
right.
lines that weren't used or supply lines that weren't used, just trying to, and then use the grants to supplement whatever else.
And they use Title II for
Yeah.
all of that work, and that is not allowed.
No, I'm
So I
in
think
favor
that's
of
what
having
we've.
I'd like having a dedicated
Right.
line, a dedicated call out.
So you know
With a
where
clear
you're
budget,
spending
you
that money.
know what it
You
means.
know where that money is going, and it's addressing the needs in the district. I think that's what we've discovered, that they were using grants that did not meet the criteria as established. So we knew we had to change that up. And you have to remember, for 2 years, there wasn't a lot of professional development going on during COVID, and we are coming back. I mean, we know that. and they didn't say this tonight, but a lot of this is driven by a professional development committee. They meet monthly with a professional development committee made up of teachers, administrators, and of course Mary and Kim, and they are the ones that have been driving this message about what teachers want. The other very important piece to this is that we have worked really hard to make sure that what happened at Abbott Downing happens at Beaver Meadow, that happens at Broken Ground and Millbrook, because what we discovered was that everybody was kind of using their own programs, and we couldn't see any consistency, and then we realized they all moved to Runlet. They all have to be in Runlet in grade 6, and so they were coming in at all with using different materials, different math materials, different reading strategies, and as a result, it was really a deficit for the youngsters coming in. And by developing the consistency, by having the teachers on board, a lot of this was driven by the teachers, and by the way, the principals too. We didn't want to move forward without their blessing. That was important. And so I know it's a bit of a change. We'll do a better job at getting you a spreadsheet to say, okay, what did we spend on that last year and what do we want to, so
Where
we
did
can
it come
show
from?
those
Yeah,
increases.
yeah.
But that's not a lot of money.
I would ask the other thing, and I heard a couple times that depends on people volunteering to come in and take this additional training and doing that. I would really like to see ongoing on a year basis is how many people are coming in, how much, if we're putting this in the budget, how
Yeah.
much of it is
I can tell
actually
you how
being
many
used?
people came last year. Hang on, I just had that spreadsheet open. I'll get that information
That's
to
okay.
you.
I just want to make sure that,
Sure
you know,
where it is
we're
now.
committing a significant amount of money potentially on this into professional development and training. And if we're doing it, I want it to be of value and that people are coming in to take advantage of it. If they're not coming in and taking advantage of it, it can be a great program, but it doesn't make any difference. So I want to see that success rate. I have great faith in that success rate, but I'd like to see the numbers.
I know last year we were curious about how much funds were allocated in other districts. I think, especially for new board members as well, that's always helpful information to see as well.
Mary, do you have that?
That slide was in there, your last year's presentation, but we can update those numbers.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can do that, because all their budgets are online too, so it's easy to get that information.
Thank you so much.
Okay. That'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you. You don't mind if I leave?
So how would you like us to bring this back? Should we give us a little time? I've got a ton of questions here to respond to your issues, and maybe at an open session. Would that be
Yeah,
the
this
best
is
way to do
In
it?
the past, what we have done is just slot that into one of our open sessions
Okay.
where you come back and give us more information on the things that we had asked for.
Thank you.
And if that works for the other members of the board, then I am okay with that. Okay? I don't see anybody disagreeing with me. so.
I think John should put his off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
20 minutes, you said? Thanks very much.
All right, so we're at 7 o'clock, so we have 3 things. But remember, you have part 2, because this is a 2-part mini-series, these 2 sessions. So what we wanted to do, I had a small introduction as it related to some information we gave you previously, and then some stuff that the governor mentioned yesterday that was sent to us. We did a what-if scenario. And then, I don't know if you want to start going through John's presentation, but I also know you have a non-public tonight.
That is a lot.
Do you want to try to fit it in what we
These
can?
two things shouldn't have been put together.
No,
at all. I don't know how they got put together.
Well, there's 2 sessions, so we tried to
There's another
see how
session.
far we could get tonight. Yeah,
Oh,
Mondays.
there is.
Yeah.
Oh,
Part-
then
yeah.
So
let's do the
Would
non-public.
Monday, could Monday be just John? totally gone?
Sure, yeah.
He's loved sitting
Now
there this
that
whole
you
time waiting.
Here.
No, but
You need a tissue, John?
gives you time to learn.
And I think too is I'm a former, prior to coming to here, I was the superintendent of curriculum instruction in another district. So I work and partner with Kim often and Mary. We partner every day on these things. So I'm very happy part of a team and work with her on this. So it's okay on that part.
Thank you. And
So-
our eyes will still be open
Yeah.
at least when we listen to you this time.
So
Okay,
do
that's
you want me to hit
so
my
Jack,
little
you wanna
mini
Yeah, go ahead,
piece and then the
Jack.
non-public?
Yes.
All right, I'll do it.
Go ahead.
Thank you, John.
Show us the thing.
All right. Okay. So I just had my opening slide. This was the agenda to get into it. So we're going to revisit the state adequacy. So this will somewhat answer two questions. One was, I think Jonathan had the question as it related to when I gave you this slide, it was trying to understand the breakdown of, okay, adds, subtracts. So I took the same slide that was originally presented, that's the slide, and all I did was add the little pluses and minuses all the way to the left and bolded it. So you can see that when you take adequacy and swept, that's the total amount we're getting. When you subtract them both, they net to zero. That's the grand piece. They're the two major components. The adequacy detail, what makes up that 16 million or 14 million there is base plus free and reduce plus special ed plus ELL plus third grade. That equals your total cost of an adequate education. Then there's another component of the SWEPT, which is the statewide education tax. Then there's a relief grant. Then there's an extraordinary needs grant, which was new last year, if you remember. Then that gives you that subtotal. Then you take that subtotal, you add a SWEP hold harmless, which is done now, stabilization grant, hold harmless grant, gives you the bottom line. Does that make sense now?
Thank you.
All right, so hopefully that takes care of that. Now, yesterday, the governor, so this is interpretation, I put it in red. The governor had did an announcement, we read the paper, that could be good or bad, depends on how you look at it. So we put together what that potential impact could be if, because it said targeted. So we just took the number at its pure number. I think it was an extra $966 to base adequacy, $584 to free and reduced. And we said if we took the FY23 budget, you compare to the FY24, which is what we just showed you. If that is additional adequacy and they're changing the number that they originally published in November, and now this is in addition to that, that's that additional FY24 aid. So that is about $4 million. See that column, the third column over? Okay. So if that is what they mean by that, and that were to pass, the total estimated aid for 24 would be all the way down the bottom of 19 million versus the 14 million that we were expecting. But then when I compare 23 to 24 with that new number, it's $2.9 million more. Does that make sense?
DOE hasn't released spreadsheets, I assume, at this point, of the governor's plan.
Have
Say-
they
say
released
that
it?
again.
We haven't. no.
Kim, say that
They're
again.
still putting them together.
Yeah,
so
I'm
it'll take a
sure.
couple
So,
of weeks. Yeah.
again, I took what I read. Now, we might not be at 9 something. We might be like 500 something. I think the only optimism I take out of it is if you have a governor of a different party that is a little different as it relates to public education, and he wants to increase it, I gotta wonder if there might be some kind of consensus to something coming out of here. That's the only thing I take out of it.
The House Finance Committee, I think, passed a $100 million increase using a different formula, so we'll see how it works out.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't spend this money in March.
Well,
I would do our
no.
budget based on what we know now.
Exactly. But, you know, then do you take some risks, as we were talking about, do you take some risks with your trust funds to bring some things down and know that if the extra comes in, you'll replenish it with that? Because you know and I know they're not passing that thing till June.
Right.
Unless some, I don't know what would happen.
Do you
Exactly.
understand what Jack said? That money comes out of your trust, use it if that you want to help with your increases. And then we would, if this number holds or some number holds, you can replace that with that amount of money.
Right.
I mean,
And again-
I agree. Pam said, you've got to know what you
Yeah.
know, but also if there is some reality there, do you want to take some bets and risk to mitigate?
We
But
wanted to,
either way, you can say it comes from here, it comes from there, you're talking about increasing your budget. And making an increase, which we should look hard at, do we need?
say that again?
I said no matter where you're bringing it from, over here or over here, right? In the long run, if we're looking at increasing the budget, we're increasing the budget. And we should only do that if it's necessary,
Based on need,
based on need.
absolutely.
And, yes, so that's a decision we'll have to make when we take a look at the overall budget.
Okay.
Chuck, I had another question.
Sure, yeah.
When are we gonna see the full budget, and when is it gonna be put?
Yeah, I will do that this week. I said I would have it Monday, and I
Okay.
didn't get to it,
Then
but
line
I
by
will do
line.
that. The line by line, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's all right.
Please.
my apologies.
Okay.
What was I looking for? That. Did you get all that presentation? I tried to do it fast.
did an excellent job.
Yeah,
Very good,
it was,
thank you.
it was a
Good
fun.
job, John.
Yeah,
Did-
yeah.
So, that is concluding what you.
I'm done. Now it's, yeah,
So
your
in
next
this
thing.
case, we had a request to go into a non-public session. Do I have someone who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Want me to read it?
You can, yes, please.
According to RSA 91A:3-91-A:3, non-public sessions, Section 2. C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the public body itself. Unless such person requests an open meeting, this exemption shall extend to any application for assistance or tax abatement or waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy, if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. That's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Walsh. Ms. Hastings, would you do a roll call for this?
Bill, Ms. Meeker,
Yes.
Mr. Croto,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Weinberg,
Aye.
Mr. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Cotton,
Yes.
Ms. Higgins,
Aye.
Ms. Walsh,
Aye.
and I will vote aye.
So
9-0.
that motion will pass for the people who are watching streaming or on cable. As we come out of non-public, we will not be conducting more business, but we'll be just moving straight to adjournment. So we will end the broadcast at this point. With that, since the motion is passed, we're in non-public session.